kind of singing to my dogs. I'm like, I'm gonna get some sleep. And I should have known that something was gonna be off right away because things were just going too smoothly. This year, probably my biggest unforeseen challenge was really hard to predict. I heard a whole uproar from just on the other side of the electric fence, which I was camped right next to. A major aspect of being successful in the Iditarod is your ability to overcome adversity and to handle unforeseen challenges. This year, probably my biggest unforeseen challenge was really hard to predict. That is when I arrived in Rainy Pass and was visited by a rather large herd of semi-wild ponies. Here's how we ended up in this situation. First of all, this is towards the end of the Iditarod. We've been out there racing for many days, and this is the part of the race where you're really focused on maximizing every minute the dog is on the trail. Making sure that they're running comfortably and at the right pace, not going too fast and burning more fuel than they should, not going too slow and keeping your dogs on their feet for too long. When you're stopped and resting, every second of this resting time is imperative to the health of the dog. You want to make sure that they get as many seconds as possible. Yes, we do have to measure this in seconds to rest and recuperate and rejuvenate. So when I left the my little remote camp out by Tin Creek, this is between the Roan and Nikolai checkpoints, I knew that we were going into one of the hardest sections of the race. What is it going to be like going back through some of the most technical trail going into Roan, the post-Roan Glacier, some of the overflow out there, some steep hills, and then climbing back up the Dalzell Gorge. This is something we talked about and kind of anticipated for months before the race. Fortunately, the dogs handled these tough sections of trails just absolutely like a champ. We went through the Roan section of trail, the 20 miles outside of Roan, and thankfully there had been some fresh snow, and that was easier than we anticipated. We went through the Roan checkpoint, gave the dogs a snack. They were perky and upbeat and happy and ready to take on the big climb back over the Alaska Range. That section of trail, I spent a lot of time running up these steep, kind of short, sharp hills, and then plateauing out a little bit, and then hitting the next steep, sharp hill again, and me off the sled running. So by the time I got to the top of Rainy Pass and was about to, the actual Rainy Pass, and was about to drop down to Puntilla Lake where the Rainy Pass Lodge and checkpoint is, I was actually kind of singing to my dogs. I'm like, I'm gonna get some sleep. You know, I was so excited that I was actually gonna get to lay down and sleep an hour, because on this stop break, we were really focused on resting the dogs. I'd been feeding them mini snacks along the way, so I wasn't too concerned with getting a huge meal in them. I knew they had the calories on board. They just needed a chance to sleep and kind of rejuvenate a little bit for the final long push to the Squintina checkpoint, which was gonna be about 70-mile run over to that last mandatory 8. I pulled into Rainy Pass. I was, excited that this was gonna be a good rest for the dogs. It was gonna be a great rest for me. I was actually gonna get some sleep. Murphy's Law and fortune had some other things in mind. And I should have known that something was gonna be off right away because things were just going too smoothly, and they kept saying, watch out for the electric fence. Not something a musher hears a whole lot out there on the trail. So they get me parked in there, and I can see that they have an electric fence fencing in the whole area that the dogs were camping. All right, a little bit odd. So I quickly throw out some snacks to the dogs and put out the hay beds for the dogs. Typically the sled dogs sleep on straw, but in this checkpoint, they send out actual hay because there are horses out there, and they like the horses to be able to eat the hay once the dogs are done. And also they don't want the horses eating straw, which can cause health effects for them. So I get the dogs bedded down. There's the people and the photos, and there's an award presentation for the first to the Bering Sea coast. They decided to let Rainy Pass present that award this year since we didn't go to Unalakleet. So they did that award, and once I got my dogs bedded down, I asked everybody, all right, let's move away, let's let these dogs sleep, no distractions. The dogs aren't so tired that they're just gonna curl up and zonk out. If there's distractions, they're gonna be awake, they're gonna be watching the people, seeing what's going on. So the people move away, with just me there, the dogs are able to relax, and they start going to sleep one after the next. Huge, just king-size beds full of hay that they're sleeping on. This is gonna be a perfect rest. And I've been hearing since the pre-race musher meeting how great the accommodations were for the humans at Rainy Pass. They had a big building with all these bunks, heated. We're talking pillows and blankets, the type of comforts mushers aren't used to at home, much less on the Iditarod Trail. So I was just rounding up my belongings to go into the checkpoint. I was gonna repack my personal bag, leave some stuff behind that I no longer needed. And right as I was getting this stuff, I heard a whole uproar from just on the other side of the electric fence, which I was camped right next to. People were hollering and yelling, and I panned my light over there, and it's a very bright light, and it illuminated an entire herd. I think they're Norwegian fjord ponies that were literally stampeding down the lake because they smelled this hay and they were ready for dinner. They didn't care if there was a couple scroungy little canines sleeping on that hay, they were gonna eat it. So the people are yelling and waving and trying to scare the horses back to the other side of the lake. The horses were quite intelligent, so when the people would come at them on one side, the horses would try to circle around and they'd kind of split, and they were going to go on either side of the people. And all this uproar, the horses, the people, it set off my dogs like crazy. Every single one of them popped up and they were doing their alarm bark, you know, something nervous or exciting is happening. So they're sitting there, rah, 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 barking at the horses, barking at the people. And this rodeo went on for quite some time. And it was really kind of a little bit frustrating for me. Here we try so hard to maximize every moment. And now here we are on the checkpoint, supposed to be sleeping, supposed to be resting. We just did this monstrous run in the hours leading up to this, and we have this very large run planned for after this break. And now my dogs are more nervous and excited than they have been in days instead of sleeping. Finally, we get the horses moved away, and at this point we're, you know, an hour and a half or 2 hours into what was supposed to be a 4-hour break. It seemed like they'd kept them far enough away that the dogs were able to start settling down, but still Yak and Ace were not certain about those horses, and they kept getting up and barking, which would wake up the rest of the dogs. Finally seemed to settle down enough that I went inside to try to get something to drink for me and figure out what the heck am I gonna do? Should I just put the boots back on the dogs and mush 10 miles out of the checkpoint and try to get a real rest? By that point, we will have wasted all the time that we should have been sleeping. I had a healthy lead on Aaron Burmeister and Brent Sass, who were coming up in second and third place, but not such a healthy lead that I can just skip an entire rest or waste several hours. So right as I got inside and it seemed like things were calming down, I could hear my dogs and they weren't barking. One of the gentlemen that was helping keep the horses away, and I gotta say, I just have to thank everybody in Rainy Pass because they did a fantastic job. Everybody went above and beyond to try to help with the pony problem. He came inside and had a little bit of a panicked look on his face and said, I just want to make sure if it's okay if the horses get by us, which I don't think we can hold them off, is it okay if we grab the dogs and just move them away from the hay so that nobody gets stepped on? And of course, the safety of the dogs is paramount here. And I was like, whoa, I didn't realize it was quite at that level. I'd kind of felt like things had settled down, but apparently it hadn't. So then I'm thinking, oh my goodness, what can we do? So we were saying, hey, can't we just take a whole bunch? We have piles of this hay. It's all in these plastic bags. Can't we just take it and put it on the other side of the lake and, you know, give these guys a whole feast over there and keep them away from us? Apparently they had tried with a single bale, but there were so many horses that one bale of hay wasn't enough, and they're chasing each other out of it. So some of them would keep coming back to the dogs. But eventually they did take a whole pile of straw or hay down there for the horses, and that seemed to help. So my dogs ultimately got about an hour of actual sleep. And now I'm thinking, is that gonna be enough? Their muscles have been kind of relaxed, but they have been nervous and excited with the horses here. I stayed as long as I could. I let the dogs sleep as long as they could. I went out there and just like a man on a mission to get these booties on the dogs and get them hitched up and take off. I want as short amount of time as possible from when I go out and wake up the dogs to when we are on the trail moving. I'm gonna let them sleep as long as possible. It was a little bit of a, we'll see how they look leaving here. Are they still gonna be sleepy? And this is a real big question mark. We're going into a 70-mile run, which is at the upper end of what I feel comfortable doing in one shot with the team. So I went and hitched up the tug lines after we got the booties on, and sure enough, all the dogs stand up, leaned into the harness, and man, I was so proud of this dog team. They were ready to take on whatever we put in front of them next. I was very careful leaving that checkpoint, going super slow because the horses had punched up all the snow. So there was all these, you know, hoof prints that sank down 6-8 inches, sometimes more, into the snow, which made a really uneven surface for the dogs to run on. And I didn't want to go fast out of there and have somebody stumble or trip at that uneven kind of potholed surface. So I let them go real slow. Also, I wanted them to slowly warm up and get their blood moving and let their muscles get loosened up before we started moving. So the first few miles, I could feel by how much pressure I was putting on the brake that there was energy, there was vitality, and there was strength in this team. I didn't know for sure how they were going to be until we got about 3 or 4 miles out of the checkpoint. I started letting off the brake, and they were right up to our normal traveling speed and clipping along nicely. I think that they would have been even stronger had they had a full 4-hour rest there rather than a very disrupted stop where they only got maybe an hour, hour and a half of total sleep. But this is one of the reasons why I like to have a very strong team at the end of the Iditarod. I don't want to be running on fumes for the final miles. I want to have a nice tank of gas with plenty in there to do what needs to be done, because that strength in the team is our buffer. There will always be adversity on the Iditarod. It may be a storm on the Bering Sea coast. It may be drifted snow or heavy wet snow. It may be a herd of ponies in Rainy Pass. But whatever the challenge is, there will be a challenge. And now the question is, how big is the challenge relative to the strength of your dog team? It's always a relative comparison. What seems like a big challenge at the end of the Iditarod, if you have a tired team, would probably not be a big challenge if you were on a training run at home. So this is why I always like to have extra fuel in the tank, because in these moments where the dogs didn't get a full rest, and they needed to be able to continue on, they had plenty of reserve strength to do what they needed to do. I was very pleased with these guys and super proud of them as they completed that 70-mile run coming into Squintina. They did it beautifully. They finished strong and happy. When we got to Squintina, they ate the entirety of their meal, and now they were ready for a nice long break. And I made sleeping a little bit more of a priority on our mandatory 8 rather than getting more calories into them or something like that. I let them get a nice long rest in Squintina, and when it was time to leave there, that was one of the nicest looking teams I've ever been able to drive out of that last mandatory 8, and perhaps had ever seen leave one of those mandatory 8. So I was pretty proud to be part of that team, and obviously the rest is history. From Squintina to the finish line, I think we were about 2+ hours faster than the second place team. So obviously the team was still strong and vital and looked amazingly beautiful at the finish line. But I like to have enough of a buffer that when there's that challenge we didn't predict, when there's that challenge that you couldn't really have foreseen, the team is ready to handle it. One, because they have the strength and the vitality they need to handle that. Secondly, because we're going to handle it as a team. We're not going to leave one dog on their own to solve any problem. When they face a challenge, they know that it's not just them having to fix it. It's them and the entire pack around them.